War, unfortunately, seems to be a constant in human history, with the first recorded war taking place in Mesopotamia in 2700 BCE. With all the conflicts that humans have fought in throughout history, we have needed to create ways to name all of these wars. So perhaps the most common way that wars are named is that they are named after where they were fought. This can be seen with things such as the Korean War, the Gaelic War, the Falklands War, the Iraq War. You get the idea. Yet some of these are even interesting in their own way, such as the Vietnam War. While known by this name in the West, in Vietnam itself the war is known as the American War, and more formally as the Resistance War. Another name for it is the Second Indochina War, to differentiate it from the First and Third Indochina War that were fought in Vietnam. Yet when wars get so big and cover multiple countries, just one country's name won't suffice. This of course led to the naming of the two most infamous wars in human history, World War I and World War II. World War I started in 1914 and the name World War first appeared in that year too, first appearing in Germany as Waterkrieg, while over in France and here in Britain it was going by a different name, Le Grande Guerre in French, and of course the Great War here in Britain. Logically you'd think that it wouldn't be named World War I until the second one started, like how the PlayStation became known as the PlayStation 1 only when the PlayStation 2 came out. God, that's an awful analogy. Yet, the earliest known instance of it being considered the First World War came before it had even come to an end. In a diary entry from the 10th of September 1918, British officer Lieutenant Colonel Charles Accord Repington recounted a meeting with Major Johnston of Harvard University to discuss how historians should refer to the war. In the diary, Charles wrote, "Finally, we mutually agreed to call it the First World War, in order to prevent the Millennium folk from forgetting that the history of the world was the history of the war." I guess somewhere between having wars named after single countries and wars being named after the whole world, we have wars that are named after two nations, usually named after the nations who are taking part in the war. This can be seen with the likes of the Anglo-Burmese War fought between the British and Burmese between 1824 and 1885, and the Franco-Prussian Wars fought between the Germans and the French. What's interesting in wars named like this, however, is they seem to usually take from the country's Latin name, such as with Anglo instead of English and Franco instead of French. Another way we name wars is after people who played a big impact on them. This is most popularly seen with the Napoleonic Wars, named after French military leader and Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte. What we also have is a collection of wars between France and Britain during the 1600s and 1700s, during the time of colonial America, and they're all named after people ranging from British royalty like King William's War, Queen Anne's War, and King George's War, to wars named after religious figures like Father Raoul's War, named after missionary Sebastian Raoul, and Father Lelut's War, named after French priest Jean-Louis Lelout. Oddly, there's actually a sizable amount of wars named after animals of all things, one of these being the Pig War, a bizarre war that started in 1859 thanks to some disputes about borders between the British and Americans, and when a pig owned by a Brit wandered onto the land of an American farmer. When the pig started eating the farmer's potato, he shot and killed the pig in a fit of rage. The owner of the pig and the owner of the potatoes rowed for a while, and yes, this really did turn into a war. Thankfully, however, there were no casualties. We even have the War of the Stray Dog. This war started in 1925 out of tension between Greece and Bulgaria and a series of conflicts between the two. Yet when one Greek soldier's dog ran across the border and his owner ran after him, he was shot by the Turkish side, which led to fire on both sides, lasting 6 days and over 100 deaths. Bad doggy. And of course we have the Great Emu War, named for the fact that it was Australian soldiers and farmers against 20,000 ravenous emus. Seriously guys, I'm not making this up. Only in Australia. And of course we have some outright weirdly named wars, fought over equally weird reasons, such as the War of the Oaken Bucket. In 1325, a war broke out between the two city-states of Modena and Bologna, when their rivalry went out of control when Modena soldiers raided and stole a large wooden bucket from Bologna. This war lasted 12 years and poor Bologna never even got their bucket back. And we have the War of Jenkins' Ear between the British and Spanish in 1738. The war had been in the works for a while, but the breaking point was when British mariner Robert Jenkins displayed his severed ear to Parliament, blaming a Spanish coast guard for cutting it off as punishment for smuggling. Perhaps one of the most interestingly named wars wasn't a war at all. As Wikipedia puts it, it was a state of geopolitical tension. I'm of course talking about the Cold War between the United States and the USSR, considered to be between 1947 and 1991. But why was this time called the Cold War? Sure, Russia can get pretty chilly at times, but the cold in the Cold War is actually referring to the relationship between the US and Russia during this period. The name was actually coined by Bernard Baruch, advisor to then President Woodrow Wilson in in 1947. Another way that we name wars is after the duration of the war. This can range from anything between the 6-day war between Israel, Jordan, Egypt and Syria to 2 separate 100 Years' wars between France and Britain. Though what's interesting about the 100 Years' War is the first was actually 116 years long and the second 126 years long, but I guess just 100 years sounds much better.
Hey Patrick, are you talking about history without me?
Hilbert, what are you doing in my neck of the woods?
Well, I overheard you talking about wars over here, specifically wars named after their duration, and you left out the 80 Years' War.
Well, sorry Hilbert, I left out a fair few wars in this video. What's so fascinating about the 80 Years' War?
What's so fascinating about it? Jeetje, wat een typische Engelse eikenneuter. It was the mighty struggle of the fledgling Dutch Republic against the might of the Spanish Empire, and it's the reason why today we're free to ride bikes from windmill to windmill, eating our stroopwafels and selling our tulips to tourists. Hey guys, why don't you and Patrick come over to my channel History with Hilbert after you've watched this video and watch my latest video on this most pivotal of wars?
Well, I guess we should go learn some history with Hilbert. See what I did there?
Ik ben weg.
A huge thank you as always to all my patrons. I get the feeling that YouTube will demonetize this video as it's about war, so if that annoys you as much as it annoys me and you want to help support the channel when YouTube doesn't, then why not consider supporting the Patreon? Just $2 a month will get your name with all these awesome people. Thank you.